Hey everyone, thank you so much for coming along. There are so many other good talks going on at this time. I've been looking through the agenda, and for some reason, you've chosen to be here to talk about ISO 42001 with me. Um, this is, I think, a really relevant topic for where we're at the moment. And before we kind of get into it and start talking through what this is, how it might apply to you, and kind of what makes up the standard and so on, and I'll start explaining terms like AI management system. Just wanted to poll the room quickly and understand where everyone is sort of at. So first things first, has everyone heard of ISO before, or the International Organizational Standards? Yeah, so good. Had anyone heard of ISO 42001 before today or done any research on it? Okay, cool, good. Maybe that was like 50%-ish of the room. And has anyone implemented another ISO standard before? Cool. So a lot of what we talk about today, for those who put their hands up there, will feel really familiar because there's so much overlap. You'll find it really helpful to go on this journey if you choose to take it forward. So why have this conversation now? Well, you only have to look across the conference today, and I'm sure probably conversations each and every one of you are having in your own businesses to see that AI is everywhere. Everyone is racing to do things. You may have had some things you've got live into production. You may have had some big failures already as you've tested things out and they've not worked. And what we've seen across our kind of community and our customers is that maybe over the course of the last year in particular, there's been a real shift in focus around the conversation from that initial surge of people wanting to execute everything and thinking particularly that LLMs were going to be the massive game changer that will deliver immediate success to their business. And the conversation started to focus a bit more onto governance and actually, okay, this has gone not as smoothly as we thought, this is more difficult, or maybe we've had some great success and we now want to scale. I've certainly got customers I'm working with that are looking at full agentic AI rollouts because they've seen some real success. So they're coming at this kind of thing from a, hey, we need to take this seriously now because it's real. Others are coming at it from a, things have not gone so well, we need some controls, we need to do this a little bit better. And that drive for kind of governance, which is where that conversation has started from a lot, has then shifted and evolved a little bit more into the more holistic kind of processes and wraparound of like, well, how do you actually kind of deliver and use and build AI in your business? That quickly leads to a question of, well, okay, I need to do something. Where do I start? What standard should I use? And for a long time, there wasn't really anything out there. If you were looking for a global standard you could adopt and adapt for your own business. In December 2023, ISO 42001 launched, which was the new AI management system from ISO, aimed at dealing with and tackling that exact problem. I've been through this journey myself with ISO 27001, and I was in exactly the kind of same position. This was about 5-6 years ago now, where I wanted to improve how we managed security at Cynozure. I didn't really know what I was doing because I'm not a cybersecurity expert, and I knew I wanted to have a good structure in place and something that, as I go through due diligence with customers and so on, could demonstrate that we take things seriously, we've got the right controls and processes in place. So I went down the ISO 27001 route and have now maintained that standard for 5 years and been through an update. And this presentation is kind of written around what I wish I knew when I set out on doing ISO 27001 and someone had sat down and talked to me about. So hopefully, a lot of criticisms I often hear about presentations at Big Data London are that they are sales pitches for things. So this should be like 24 minutes and 58 seconds of education and hopefully getting you up to speed on the standards, and like 2 seconds at the end about how I might be able to help you. So first things first, I think most people put up their hand and said they knew who ISO was. They're the organization with the most infuriating acronym because it's the International Organization for Standardizations, and for some reason they went with ISO. But they do a whole load of things. So 27001, that's one probably lots of you are familiar with, very common information security standard. 9001, another really, really common one that you see in a lot of different organizations, all about how you manage quality in your organization. And then things like standard for paper sizes and all kinds of other small things like that. Now, fundamentally, what ISO are trying to do is they're trying to make it easier in a global economy for businesses and organizations to interact and work together effectively, help reduce barriers to trade, help drive up quality, help make it easier to cooperate, and so on. They are, a non-governmental international body made up of a lot of national standards organizations that come together to shape these standards. Before we talk about 42001 specifically, then, management systems get referenced a lot across the ISO standards. Indeed, 42001 is an AI management system, and that's the kind of definition on screen for a management system, a structured framework that an organization uses to establish policies, processes, and procedures to achieve specific objectives efficiently and consistently. That's a bit wordy and a bit obtuse and hard to understand sometimes. So for me, I boil down these management systems as they are a way fundamentally to manage and mitigate risk in your organization and drive continual improvement. And that's one of the things that I really like about ISO 42001 and the ISO standards generally, is that continuous improvement bit is really baked into the DNA of how you do these things well. And it forces you to constantly improve and makes you think outside of often just the core topic that you're doing and delivering. Using our experience with ISO 27001, for example, that's driven us to automate a load of our onboarding and offboarding journeys as part of that, which, while not directly part of the standard, actually, as part of onboarding, I need to make sure people read our policies and accept them and get some training and all sorts of things like that. And actually, we've just said, well, there's loads of things we need to do, so let's automate all of that. So that drive for continuous improvement is a really important part of it. But fundamentally, it's making sure that you are really consciously building out the policies and processes, setting clear objectives and targets, and continuously getting better with what you do. So what is it? Well, when you go out and sort of buy the standard, you're kind of fundamentally buying a document. It is 199 Swiss francs at the moment, which, with some inflation, because I bought it for 189 Swiss francs. But I think it's a 62-page PDF that you get as part of that. So it's not even that massive. This isn't, you're buying a huge book and a load of details when you get it. And it's also distinct from the certification side of it, which we'll touch on in a little bit. But within that document, and I'm going to talk to you about the structure of what makes it up. We're going to talk about some of the controls and things in there in detail, but fundamentally, it is giving you a structured approach to putting in place a responsible, effective system for managing the use of AI in your organization. It's got all the sorts of controls that you need to put in place and the standards that you need to put in place. But very importantly, it's focused on things that are specific and unique to AI. So as a standard, it's very much designed to build on top of existing standards that most organizations who are probably going down this route have in place. So there is almost a baked-in assumption to it that you've got something like ISO 27001 or 9001 or something, that you are doing risk management and have risk management processes in place, for example. So I think that's something to be conscious of if you're thinking of just jumping in here and you've got limited kind of governance and control. You might find it a bit of a leap going immediately into this, and you'll have more work to do. So it's far from insurmountable, but kind of note that it doesn't hold your hand on some elements it kind of expects you to have. And fundamentally, it's this risk-based thing. So this was one of the big learnings for me going through ISO 27001. It's not a one-size-fits-all. It's not a list of you must do all of these things and you must do them exactly like this, and if you do that, you'll be good. You have to understand yourself as an organization, and I'll talk a little bit about that context piece in a minute, what you're doing with it, which controls are relevant for you, how much risk you're carrying, and so on, and then you need to tailor it accordingly to make sure it's fit for purpose for what you're doing, which is another bit I really like about it, because you can make sure it works for you. I, as in the grand scheme of things, a small organization compared to, say, a 50,000 person global corporation, can have the same standard, but will have applied it in quite different ways in practice because of the very big differences in the nature of our workforces and our systems and our data and our customers and so on. So with that in mind, who is it for? Well, it's for everyone. There's really no limit. So if you're thinking, well, we're quite a small company or we're in a specific, I don't know, industry or something, the stuff that's covered inside this standard, if you're looking at and needing to do good AI governance, is going to be applicable for every single person in this room, every single person at this conference, and so on. Again, because of that kind of adaptability piece that makes it up. So why would you jump on it? Well, we kind of talked about it a bit at the start, that for a lot of people, you will be looking to do AI governance and you perhaps don't know where to start. There's some new things with AI that we've not had to deal with in traditional governance problems before. We have these non-deterministic systems that are giving us results and outcomes that we can't always consistently predict. Well, that's not really the kind of thing that we've dealt with at scale in organizations in the past, and so it needs new ways and methods of dealing with it. Perhaps, like I did with our information security standard, you want to demonstrate to your customers, to your suppliers, partners, people in your world, that you're taking this stuff seriously. There's a huge now public awareness of AI out there. So the general populace, regardless of whether they're in our kind of world of data, has an understanding of AI, probably often at times a poor understanding, and they might have grave concerns about it. So being able to communicate to them, hey, we've got this standard, we're doing this properly, we're taking this seriously, we're doing it in a responsible, ethical way, is potentially really powerful tool to have at your disposal when you're interacting and talking to customers and partners. Regulatory initiatives, of course. So this is only driving up and up and up, and I'm sure we haven't seen the end of incoming laws and rules and regulations in this space. And depending on the various industries you will represent, you might be in a already highly regulated industry, perhaps something in financial services or healthcare, for example. So having this stuff in place, while not specifically aiming at addressing any single law or piece of legislation, is a really great foundation and framework upon which to build. And lastly, you've got real risks in your organization. So that can be everything from, hey, I've got people out there using the free version of ChatGPT and I don't really know what they're doing, what they're putting in it, what they're using the results for, and I've got no way currently to manage that, and that's a real problem for me. It could be I deal with hugely sensitive information, and actually the risk of a breach of misuse or something is a real problem. So that need to mitigate risks is another big reason to do this, is actually get a good risk management framework in place, properly understand your business and the risks that you're facing, and deal with it. So getting into the standard, super thrilling slide for this, but this is basically the content page of the ISO standard and how the document is broken up. So the introductions is all just the usual kind of general stuff that you get at the start of any of these ISO standards. And if you're familiar already and you've been implementing a standard, clauses 4 to 10 will probably all look very familiar, because the ISO standards, they all follow a very similar and consistent pattern in their structure and the things that they cover, which again makes it really easy once you've sort of done one of these to start going and running with these. Now, clause 4 is really, really important, and this is where it all starts, is about understanding the context of your organization. So maybe you are just a consumer of AI solutions and systems, which there's probably no one who isn't that now, right? Because it's in everything, so it's hard to kind of avoid the AI features that are rolling out across all of the SaaS vendors and platforms that we all use every day. Maybe you're a developer and are building AI systems. That could be as a product that you're shipping to customers. It could be you're building your own systems for internal use or something else in there. And the context piece gets you to ask questions about, well, how do I fit in here? How am I using AI? In what capacity? And what are the kind of internal and external considerations I need to take into account when I think about my implementation of this? So am I under any particular laws, regulations, etc., that I need to abide by? What does my competition look like they're doing? Are there any particular expectations in the culture and society that I'm operating in about how we're going to do these things? And internally, what are my objectives as an organization? What are the constraints that I'm working under? So starting from that point is really important because it then sets the tone for everything you do afterwards. It's going to help you understand your risk appetite. It's going to help you understand the effort that you need to be putting into this and the areas that you need to focus on. 5 through 10 then, they all start to cover the kind of meat of what you're expected to have in place and what a good AI management system looks like in your organization. So things like leadership is about setting out clear responsibilities in your organization. And there's generally an expectation that you'll have some sort of AI management committee established that will be representative of senior leadership in your organization to show that you've got that commitment to doing your stuff properly. Things like planning are building out and doing risk assessments to understand, well, what are the risks that I currently have in my organization and how am I going to go about addressing them? Stuff under support's all about, do you have the people, the skills, the resources you need to actually deliver this? Are you doing the right communications to people? And so on. Operation is then kind of the counterpart to planning in many ways. So, well, you've laid out a bunch of risks and things you plan to do, now execute on them. So go out, put controls in place, run them effectively, continue to improve them, and so on. Performance evaluation, exactly what it sounds like. How well is this working and where do we need to improve? And that includes doing things like internal audits. You have like a quarterly auditor that comes in to do our information security audit, for example, which is really helpful because it gives me that external view, make sure we're not marking our own homework and so on and taking this stuff seriously. And improvement, lastly, is just that continuous improvement piece. So where are we going to go next? How are we going to make sure that we're delivering on our commitments on this? The Annex A, though, is where a lot of the action is and where we'll be talking about things going forward, which is all of the controls that you can put in place with this standard. So there are like 38 controls in total, and these describe all the things that you expect to see in your business if you've implemented the standard. B is not super helpful. So honestly, if you're looking at that and thinking, oh great, I'm going to get a load of implementation guidance for AI controls, like there's some good little tidbits in there, but on the whole, it's pretty lightweight. It's not, here's the plan, off you go kind of thing. You will not find it particularly useful. So, you know, if you're looking at that list and thinking, great, some implementation guidance on how to put the controls in place would be really useful, don't bet too much on that. C just gives you some potential risks that you can help, make sure you're thinking about your risk register properly and that you've captured everything. And I honestly don't know why they put D in at all, because it's like 1 or 2 pages of sort of general stuff about AI in some sectors. So you don't need to really worry about that bit at all. One of the things I should have said earlier with this is there's a big part of this for a lot of people, which is about certification. So going and getting the badge. And there's different ways you can go about getting certified for an ISO standard. But you don't have to get certified. So if you're just sort of setting off and you're thinking, I need an AI sort of governance and management system in place, I need some processes and controls and so on, you can implement all of this without having to bother going to get certified and maintain a certification and so on. Obviously, you won't have the badge and so on, but if you're doing all the things, then you will have good governance in your organization. So I think that's really important to remember. That certification's optional, but if you want that badge externally, then you're going to need to go that route. So we'll focus quickly on controls. So there are 38 controls in total, and these are the measures that you're taking to address risks in there. And these are the kind of things that you get checked against when you're being, say, audited, or if you're going for your annual sort of recertification and so on. You don't have to implement every single control in the standard. So there will be lots of controls that may not be relevant to you. And you also can and probably should add your own controls into these things as well. So this gives you a great baseline and a sort of, I hesitate to say minimum standard because it's more than minimum, but it gives you a great baseline standard. And then based on your organization and what you're doing, you can then add your own controls in where you see specific risks that perhaps aren't directly addressed or tackled in there overall. So it's quite a lot of flex here. And when you go through this process, there's something you can fill out called a statement of applicability, which is just basically for all of the controls. You sit there and you say, does this control apply to me? If it doesn't, why doesn't it? If it does, how am I meeting that control? What am I putting in place? So that might be pointing to policies or roles and people that you've got in place, or a process you've established, or a system or a tool or something like that. Now, here's some kind of examples of the controls. And again, they're kind of high level, and that's where some of that guidance bit I was talking about earlier comes in, that expands on these a little bit more in terms of what's the sort of things you should think about under these headings. But there's things like the organization shall document a policy that for the development of or use of AI systems and so on. So this is what a control is when we're talking about a control. This is there are 38 of these items, and there are 38 of those across 9 different areas. So we'll shoot through quickly what those areas cover, so you can get a feel of the breadth of kind of controls that are in place. So policies is kind of an obvious one for anything that you're doing, but this is really about laying out your stall and having that leadership backing to say, this is the way we are expecting to approach managing and using and delivering AI in our organization. And those policies, they might not be the nth level of detail. You know, a lot of the policies are almost say, you know, we shall have this in place. Someone shall do this job, without necessarily saying exactly how or writing out and spelling out the policy itself. Clear roles and responsibilities then. So lots and lots of people will be involved in this. And sorry for anyone taking pictures, I've got all 9 of these on one slide at the end, so you can wait for that as well. So internal defined roles and responsibilities. Lots of people are going to be involved in the life cycle. People who are just sitting and using it, people who administrate it, people who are purchasing it, people who are developing it and testing it, and all sorts of things in there. So really understanding the clear roles of everyone in your business in the context of the standard and the use of AI in your business. Resources for AI systems. So what are the data, tools, systems, people? Like, there's a lot of things that come together in order to effectively deliver and use AI in the organization. Do you know where they are and what they are? It's actually a great place to start with a lot of this stuff, is figuring out what you've got in your organization that relates to this topic. Have you got a process for understanding the impact of AI on your employees, on your customers, on the communities you operate in, on society at large? I think if some organizations out there probably thought a bit more about this, there would be less problems with the use of AI in the world at the moment. But this is really important to making sure you understand how the things that you're using and delivering and building are going to impact people. The AI system life cycle. So think full potential life cycle from, you might be gathering requirements, designing it, building it, testing it, releasing it, supporting it, deprecating it. If you're maybe in the building mode, and the versions of that might apply if you're just procuring software to use in your organization. Having clear documentation across all of that life cycle that states what should be happening, how it should be working, that's kind of what these controls are addressing. Data, of course, super important. So do you understand where data is coming from, if it's of the right quality, how it's being used in the system, and so on. So for those who are like data governance people in the room, this will overlap a lot with what you might already be doing in this space. Information for interested parties of AI systems. So you will have lots of people both inside and outside your organization who might interact and be impacted and affected in some way. So this is, you know, what information am I providing to make sure people understand what I am providing them, how it impacts them, how it might affect them, including some of the communication of, you know, if there's problems and issues. The use of AI systems, so the controls and policies to make sure that you use AI responsibly and ethically inside your organization. So that might be like, hey, we provide you this tool set, let's say ChatGPT, you shouldn't be going and doing like vibe hacking with it. That wouldn't be an okay use. You shouldn't be using it to generate hate speech. That wouldn't be an okay use, those sorts of things. And then lastly, third-party and customer relationships. So you're going to be in a supply chain inevitably with this. So when you think about, I don't know, maybe you're a Salesforce user and you've got Einstein in there, do you understand what you're expecting Salesforce to be responsible for with that system and what is on you to be responsible for in that system, as an example? So this is making sure across your customers, across your suppliers, and that whole chain that you know what responsibilities you've got and what you've given to other people. I'll leave that up for like a couple of seconds for those who want to grab a photo. So all in, 38 controls. They require lots of work to, flesh out and put in place. But if you build something that covers all of those areas, then you're very well covered in terms of having a really good governance system in place. And you don't need it all on day one. Again, think continuous improvement. So you want to keep going. So last one, I'm going to skip on. What doesn't it cover though? So we've mentioned already that it builds on other management systems. So coming in cold just to try and do this with little other governance in your organization, you're going to have a bigger lift because you're going to have to establish more of the fundamentals. If you don't have a risk management system, for example, you're going to have to put that in place, whereas you can easily piggyback on an existing one. It's not a detailed implementation guide. So as I say, you may well need hand-holding through this process, or you're certainly going to have to do lots of extra research, reading, thinking in order to build this stuff out, because this isn't a step-by-step how-to guide, nor is it a set of templates. So it doesn't give you, here's an example policy that you can use. In that guidance bit, it will say, look, a policy might cover A, B, and C, but it's not exhaustive, it's not detailed, it's like a couple of bullets. And it's also not tailored and customized to you. So as we've said, you have to adapt this standard to your context and your level of risk and what you're doing. So where would you start? Well, if you're thinking, yeah, great, we do need to put something in place and this feels like a great starting point, then initially getting a team together, because it's definitely helpful to work with some peers. And I think about that team as representative across a few different parts of your organization. So maybe some legal, some HR, some IT, some security, that sort of thing. So you've got representatives from across the board. Doing a gap analysis, so just understanding how well are we set against those controls already? Because actually you might find that a lot of it you actually can point to existing things in place and say, hey, we're actually not bad at a lot of these things already, and we're 50% of the way there to having this standard in place. Risk and value analysis, so then taking a second to go, well, what are the risks we face as an organization in the context of AI? And how much value is there in solving them? Because again, this is an effort to implement. It takes time, it takes money and commitment. So you want to understand that there's genuine benefit and that you have a big enough problem so that you can right-size your effort. And then getting that stakeholder engagement, especially with leadership teams, and building out that roadmap with them to say, here's where we're going to start, and here's when, if you're going for certification, maybe we're looking to get to that, and here's how we're going to build out from the baseline of the standard. And if you do all of that, then you get a lot of good stuff. So you can talk to your internal, external stakeholders. You are much better in a place for compliance and regulatory awareness. So it's going to help make compliance with those sorts of things easier, better risk. That continuous improvement culture drives a real change in behaviors when you do it really well. And at least to start with, I think this is a way to differentiate yourself from the market, because there are not really people out there yet that are actively demonstrating this. So I think that takes us just about out of time. My 2 seconds sales pitch is, if this is something you're looking at, then we help people go on this kind of journey and be happy to talk to you. I'll hang around either outside or down the bottom of the stairs if anyone's got any questions. And if you found this useful, we've got a couple of other great talks coming up with the pensions regulator who we did their data strategy with. And I'll be talking about delivering agentic AI at scale and the sorts of things you need to think about beyond just governance. So thank you very much for coming along and enjoy the rest of the conference.